TechCrunch Sessions Enterprise is a new event coming to San Francisco on September 5th, 2019. The New Stack is partnering with TechCrunch to get the word out, and we'll be there, moderating a session and live streaming. TNS listeners get a 30% discount on the current ticket price for event registration when using the code TNS30. That's all caps, TNS30. Go to techcrunch.com/events to register, and we'll see you there. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here for a special edition of the New Stack Makers. The New Stack is very excited to be participating in TechCrunch's first enterprise event. It's TechCrunch Sessions Enterprise. And so joining me as co-host today for our show is Ron Miller, enterprise reporter at TechCrunch. Hey, Ron, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Well, thank you. And before the podcast, we reached out to our sponsors who come from different experiences in building their own companies and helping enterprises become more modern in their approach and the way they do business through the scale out of their own architectures. And so joining me is Yvonne Wassenaar, CEO at Puppet, and Yvonne Wassenaar ran the office of the CXO of VMware, was the CIO at New Relic, and the CEO at Airware. In your work at Puppet, you have been really focusing on open source technologies and focusing your projects on tasks that automate tools such as Bolt, which is a new open source project from Puppet, and cloud-native infrastructure management tool, Lyra, which was made available for general use in late May. And that's built around HashiCorp's Terraform. Also joining us is Shawn Wormke. Hey, Shawn.
Hey, Alex. How are you?
Good. And Shawn is Senior Director at Aspen Mesh, and Shawn has 2 decades of experience building application networking and security products at companies such as F5 Networks and Cisco. At F5, Shawn was Senior Director of Product Development, working with microservices and OpenStack. How about that? He managed F5 Networks' first officially supported open source software program to integrate existing products into OpenStack, along with F5, OpenStack, key templates. And Shawn, you wrote to us to say you envision a world where developers are unencumbered by infrastructure and believe in the control, security, and manageability that a service mesh can provide. So when we talk to people, we found some major themes that people who are in your role or in your type of role are thinking about when you think about the modern enterprise. And I thought I'd go through them quickly, and then we could just go into discussion. And speed, agility, the crucial role of DevOps, open source, and achieving speed, engineering talent, and how important that is, the technology focus on data analytics, automation testing, and CI/CD. And so as enterprise software has evolved over the years, the needs have shifted quite a bit. And I've seen this from my own experience. I'm sure, Ron, you see this quite a bit in your own reporting, that there's been this change from like this systems of record to at-scale application architectures. And so maybe, I would like to ask the first question and then get your response, and then maybe, Ron, you can follow up. One question I have is about how developers and operations teams are changing their workflows, because that really gets down to the heart of it. That gets down to the people. Yvonne, do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, you come from a deep operations perspective, and you must see that quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. And thanks for having me on the show. I think all those topics that you mentioned around speed, agility, DevOps, open source, we've seen a massive shift in not only, the technology itself, but to your point, what technology is being used for, going from the back office and systems of record to systems of engagement and the empowerment of developers. And I think, from an operations perspective, and quite frankly, from a company perspective, if you're not starting to rethink and shift how you leverage and develop and run technology, you will very quickly become irrelevant. So I have spent, kind of as your summary at the beginning, about 30 years in technology, and the last 10 have been at a record pace of transformation. What is the common theme, however, is that greenfield is always new and simple, and legacy is super, super hard. And I think we're starting to settle into a reality, at least for larger companies, that hybrid and mixed blended environments is the new complexity and opportunity that we have to work within. And so to me, when I think about operations, I think it's really around how do you enable the net new possible, but without leaving everything that you've invested so far behind? How do you kind of get from where you are today to where you need to be in a quick and rapid pace? But it's not as easy as just starting everything net new and cloud native. And so that's what we spend a lot of time focusing on at Puppet, is getting that balance across today's realities and tomorrow's promise.
Shawn, so I know that you have a lot of experience in building out application architectures, and you really had some of the first iterations of what a service mesh is today. And one of the points that you've made is how the enterprises always has these forces out there that are like startups that are nipping at their heels. I'm curious on how do the teams then, adapt to that? How do the teams adapt to these new security needs that come with cloud, native architectures, for example?
Yeah, I think that generally what we hear from our customers as they start to look at these new technologies is first, they have to understand where everything is, who's talking to who, and what those things are doing. So one of the first things that they come and ask us is, can you just help me sort of take inventory of what's going on here and help me get visibility into the things that I'm running so that I can understand my security posture better, so I can make sure that applications are talking to the right services and that we're, working within our corporate governance and any kind of compliance needs that we have. That's usually the first step that they go through. And once they've done that, then they start to take stock of what kind of security policies they're going to design and how they're going to apply those to them. But just like Yvonne said, a big part of this is understanding what you can do new, what you need to leverage from your old systems, because enterprises are very big, complex machines, and they have lots of organizational challenges, lots of compliance challenges, and all kinds of different policies from all different organizations that they need to apply and make sure that their applications are behaving in the way it's going to keep them out of the news, basically.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ron, but Ron, I'm going to turn the tables a little bit.
Can I follow up on that first before you do that?
Yes, of course.
So, it's interesting because both Shawn and Yvonne talked about the need for enterprises to make this transformation. And I've been covering the enterprise for, close to 20 years. And I remember I first heard about the term cloud in like 2007 or 8. And then, in 2011 or 12, we heard about the consumerization of IT. And we keep hearing about these kind of big, huge changes, but the pace is always slower than you think. And it's certainly slower than I think as a journalist covering this stuff. And I'm always looking to what's coming next. So like what came before is just not interesting to me, but that doesn't mean it's not interesting to the people who are actually practicing this in the enterprise. So, why does it take so long for this to happen from your perspective, Yvonne and Shawn? And, where are we now? Are we at a tipping point, do you think, that change really has to come now? Because we've been hearing about this for so many years now.
Yeah, Ron, I think it's a fabulous question. And I've been staring at this for a long time as well. I started off as a system engineer back, I like to joke, when COBOL was cool, if I can ever say that. But as I look at how technology has advanced since the dark ages.
You just need to take out the B and the L, and it is.
There you go.
And there it is.
I've never thought about that, but I'm using that going forward. It is cool. Take out the B and the L.
People are really geeky.
That's perfect. But I was going to say, to me, there's a couple of reasons why it's slow. The first one is there's large investment. And so if I think about, one of our customers, one of the CTOs of a large transportation company, what he basically told me is this. He said, hey, here's the deal, Yvonne. You don't need to convince me on cloud. I'm cloud first, but I'm not cloud only. And so I'm moving as much as I can to the cloud as quickly as possible. I'm building out net new stuff, cloud native, all that stuff's great. But I've got stuff that's going to die in the data center. And the reason for that is, as much as we like to think about the benefits and the economies of scale, and more importantly, the power of machine learning and AI that you can bring when you're operating in mass that a cloud provider can help you dig into, there's a lot of legacy investment that there's just not the time and the resource, or quite frankly, the business need to re-architect overnight. And that's one of the important things that we have to understand. Like when people first started, lifting and shifting stuff into the cloud, they found out it was actually pretty expensive because it wasn't engineered for that type of architecture. And it reminds me back in the day of, from an analogy perspective, when people did business process outsourcing. It's like, oh, I'm going to lift and shift it to lower cost human resource. And then they realize, it's the same business problem you have to re-architect and you have to solve. So I think one of the reasons that the shift takes a long time is you have existing investment and it's not starting greenfield. So you have to be thoughtful around what you move over. The second is when you look at new technology capabilities like cloud, or more specifically cloud native, how you architect to optimize the new capabilities is different. And you have to go through that learning process. And that can take a while. And I'd say cloud native is very nascent. We're still figuring it out. And the third thing is it's a huge culture and talent and, skill set shift. And you can't swap out everybody you have in your development departments today and bring in a whole new swath of people who understand Kubernetes and containers and all of that. So you have to, at an enterprise level, balance out all three of those. And the dog that's nipping at your heel is that little startup that doesn't have all that legacy, that can hire that brilliant set of technologists, that can start greenfield, that can demonstrate the business advantage in being more agile and more creative and having more innovation in how you develop out. And so that's where you get these big industry disruptions, like what you saw, with Uber that, translated, taxi services. It's not, a taxi service. It's people mobility, but they did it in a very customer engaged way through new technology. So I think, startups are agile and innovative. They're biting at the heels of large enterprises that have tons of resource and customers. But those large resources, they've got a lot of legacy, both in terms of technology, but also skill sets that they have to evolve. And that just takes time.
Yeah, I think that was a great summary by Yvonne. And I think that at Aspen Mesh, we talk a lot about how, modern enterprises really crave agility. And truthfully, the ones that can achieve it, it can be their number one business advantage. And, what that agility then allows them to do is deliver value to their customers as quickly as they can, right? And that agility comes from a greater reliance on technology and newer ways of working. But that takes time. It takes people. And all the while, like Yvonne said, they're constantly defending against disruption coming from non-traditional places. And additionally, for enterprises, they have the added constraint of having to manage and maintain their revenue and profitability goals that their shareholders have grown to expect. And when you have that kind of requirement on you, you're not able sometimes to take the risks that these young startups can take. And so, what they're doing is they're looking, for new ways to do that and new tool chains, new workflows, and more automation to bring sort of some of their old stuff into the new, connect to some of their new stuff to their old stuff that's still running in the original place. And all the while trying to maintain and gain technical talent that they, don't necessarily have access to. But all that agility is great for startups, but without stability along with it, it can be detrimental to an enterprise. And so, not taking care of the stability, whether that's, uptime or data security or perimeter security, can make or break a company or its company's reputation. And it's, really easy to get caught up in the next generation of tools or software or projects. But, moving fast as an enterprise and embracing these things, you have to be really carefully consider how it's going to fit into your organization, how it works with your compliance and security needs, and really, finding trusted partners to bring along with you who can help you support and move along that continuum towards your agility goals is really key, I think, for large companies.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I can add on to what Shawn said, two things that really struck me. One is it's not all doom and gloom if you're a large enterprise. I think there is a lot of stuff that you have to shift and move. And what's interesting from where I sit is, I have, for example, a global bank that I was just meeting with the other day, and they have a tremendous amount of their technology real estate in what they call heritage, which is a nicer word than legacy. And it runs a lot of the bank around the globe. And they're not resting on their laurels saying, gosh, that's just kind of old school, stay there forever. They are introducing concepts of DevOps. They are introducing concepts of CI, CD. They're starting to introduce some of the more traditional cloud native concepts into that environment to start to evolve the skill sets of the people, the culture, and even the agility of some of these more traditional system architectures. And so I think we are seeing some interesting ways that companies are trying to, start on that journey to a more all cloud native world. But the other thing that Shawn said that I think we probably don't speak about enough is security. And as you see technology running more and more of the things around us, it's not only a greater technology landscape that bad actors have the opportunity to get into, and it's no longer you can protect the perimeter and you're safe, but it's also the things that technology is controlling is much more valuable. It's, driving your car, it's moving your money, it's dispensing your medicine, and how companies think about the security of their systems and of their technology is only going to increase in the limelight. And I think this is where increased automation, taking humans out of the loop, having, opportunities through things like service mesh to really drive a sense of scalability and security in terms of, who's connected to what, communicating to who, with what type of thing, with what type of audit trail. That type of feature functionality and level of comfort is going to become absolutely critical, particularly, as Shawn mentioned, to large enterprises who their brand is their value and they can't afford to risk that. And I think that's just something that we're going to be talking more and more about as technology continues to evolve and kind of subsume everything around us.
Their brand is their value. Now that is a great segue where I can turn my attention to Ron Miller. The TechCrunch brand actually is evolving, as most good brands do, and in particular with this new event you're doing. Just a quick question. What is the Sessions Enterprise event? What's the intention? Why is TechCrunch interested in creating a new enterprise-focused event? We just heard from Yvonne and Shawn talking a lot about the challenges they face. Kind of like that, what are some of the themes the conference will explore? Who should attend? Why?
Right. A lot of what Shawn and Yvonne just talked about are the kinds of things, obviously, that everybody in the enterprise is thinking about. And the fact that we're kind of at this, I think, pivotal moment in the enterprise. IBM just bought Red Hat for a reason, because they want to be able to get to some of those kinds of business use cases that Yvonne was just outlining. And, the security, if you want to talk about security, just look at what happened yesterday. But we have a series of sessions at TechCrunch, and, we've looked at mobile, we've looked at AI, we've looked at a bunch of different kinds of, technology issues that we've taken and set up this 8-hour, one-day session where you get really immersed in the subject. And, it's been super interesting. I was involved in the AI session in Cambridge last year, I think it was. And, you had all of these experts from the industry coming in and talking about different aspects and problems and issues that you face when you're trying to bring AI into the enterprise. And it was really a fascinating discussion. And now, it's our turn to do enterprise. And, Frederick and I, and, going back to when you were there, been covering the enterprise for a long, long time. And we just felt like it was time to give one of those concentrated sessions to the enterprise, and specifically because of some of those issues. So what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about AI, obviously, in the enterprise. We're going to be talking about security issues. We have a couple of security sessions. We're going to be talking about customer experience, which is kind of an outcome of some of these other technology innovations that companies are doing. We're going to look to the future in quantum. We're going to talk about this massive amount of data, which also plays into customer experience and AI and security and practically everything else in quantum, and how you process it, how you analyze it, and how you visualize it. And we're bringing in some really great people from some major companies, IBM, Intel, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Snowflake, Box, Portworx, Atlassian, and a bunch of others. And for who should come, anybody who's interested in the enterprise should come. And that would be investors, enterprise startup founders, IT execs, anybody who's, interested in these kinds of subjects and maybe interested in solving some of the problems that Yvonne and Shawn alluded to at the top of the podcast.
Awesome. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit, and I want to get into a little bit about your own backgrounds, Yvonne and Shawn. I always find it interesting to talk to people about their starts in technology and how that shapes their worldview today and how they think it is. What are there some of their dreams, concerns, and hopes about going forward? And I think we all face those in all of our careers, especially in this fast changing world that we're all part of. So for each of you, so Shawn, maybe we can start it off with you. How has your background in enterprise software informed your approach today? How is it affecting how you're running your enterprise software company? How is it that, those early days of your work really came to form your viewpoints and how that's reflected in Aspen Mesh?
Yeah, so I started my career at Cisco working in network security and firewalls. And as I was doing that, I watched that security sort of move up the stack from layer 2 transparent firewalls to layer 3, 4 firewalls, and having to be more and more, application aware as that happened. At the same time, what I started to notice was, the rise of VMs and software and sort of the early declines of hardware. And that led me then to move to a small startup called Light and Rate Systems, which was based in Boulder, Colorado, that F5 Networks eventually acquired. And what we focused on there was, high performance software that could be consumed more easily by F5's customers, to be quite honest. We looked at a new business model and a new consumption model and licensing model to go along with it. And ultimately, that led us to be acquired by F5. And so today, running one of the incubation projects inside of F5 called Aspen Mesh, which is focused on creating a service mesh, enterprise-grade service mesh to our customers to increase observability and security and compliance for those applications. My past experiences taught me that, things need to be higher up in the stack. They have to be application aware. People have to be able to consume them in a way that fits within their business model and has to scale along with them, right? Throughout that time, I was part of many waterfall to agile transformations and worked on projects that enabled business agility. And now I really run a team that requires that same amount of flexibility and business agility. And even though it's a small team or a small company, just like our large companies that we serve, we have to create enterprise-grade software that's focused on being secure and high quality, but do that as quickly as possible and bring as much value to our customers as quickly as we can in the market. So, we rely heavily on automation. We make sure that we're focusing on putting our human capital to work in the right places and automating the mundane and repetitive tasks. We rely more and more on data to make our decisions. And that we're making products that are secure and compliant for our customers for them to rely on. And really, that's all just part of that enterprise software background that's taught me that enterprises are a unique animal. They have unique needs that we have to serve, and they need value and time to market from us, just like they have to provide to their customers.
So Yvonne, tell me about your early days in technology. How did you get your start? And what are some of the lessons that you learned, some of the things you remember that influence you today?
Absolutely. It's always fascinating. I tell people, life's a pretty curvy path, so it can look like a straight line in retrospect. But, to me, I think what was interesting and what's so exciting about today's day and age is when I started off as a software engineer, everything was waterfall. I, like I said, coded in COBOL on green fonts on black backgrounds at Accenture. I mean, there were structure charts. I mean, the development of software was very far abstracted from the people who ultimately it would be enabling. And these projects went on for forever. And it was kind of doom and gloom. And it's what pushed me to go back to business school and do strategy consulting, because that seemed more fun and more agile. And you had a faster return on investment. But I was always drawn to technology. And I ended up spending the vast majority of my 17 years at Accenture working with technology companies, figuring out how to scale their impact globally and expand their portfolios in meaningful ways. And so to me, it was kind of an interesting path into being a CIO, where I'd spent most of my career helping companies sell technology to CIOs, actually being one myself. What really came together for me were a few core principles that I hold near and dear to my heart. One is, I think, particularly in today's day and age, being open is very, very important. I don't think there's any one technology that's going to fundamentally solve every customer problem out there. So being open and being able to integrate into companies' environments is powerful. And you may have some overlapping technology with the things that you integrate into, but let the best technology win for that customer problem. Because customers need to adapt and evolve quickly. So they need that flexibility and they value that openness. The second thing is that I feel it's very important that we leverage technology to abstract away complexity. And you see that in the programming languages, you see that in the frameworks, you see that in what Puppet does as it relates to infrastructure. We're trying to abstract away complexity to make it easier for you to do the value added work. And so we like to say that Puppet focuses up on freeing you up to do what robots can't. The robots being the automation of the infrastructure, the creation of self-healing environments, things like that. So you can do those systems of engagement and that business innovation. But I would say those are the key concepts that have really stuck with me as I think about, at the end of the day, we're not building technology for technology's sake. Sometimes we get caught in that because it's amazing what you can make technology do. We're really building technology to solve problems and to create opportunities and to be more engaging and more interactive. And so with that in mind, we want to free up, our customers to really focus on those opportunities, but do it in a way that we can kind of meet them where they are and take them where they need to be in an evolutionary approach versus thinking they're just going to flip a switch and be in a glorious new world, because life just isn't that simple.
So, one of the things that I was thinking about as I listened to you guys answer that question is just, change in and of itself. And I mean, the way, you mentioned waterfall, and now, we went to Agile, and then, we went to containers, and we went to Kubernetes, and then, service mesh. And I mean, everything begets something else, right? And there's this rapid pace of change that, enterprises don't deal with very well. And I remember back in the 2010 to 12 timeframe, when it was becoming clear that you needed to move to the cloud, or you would, as you put it, be left behind. There was still a lot of resistance from, old school IT folks that it was, you got some comments like, over my dead body will I move my company's data to the cloud, which of course everybody either did or is in the process of doing. And I don't think there are bodies piled up. But, there's this difficulty in dealing with change, and there's this difficulty, I think, in knowing what is actually substantive change and what is just kind of a pie in the sky that's going to flame out change. And, CIOs and IT pros have to deal with that and kind of sort through it. And I'm wondering how you guys think about that and how you talk to your customers about it, because you're obviously selling them solutions, but they have to know that the solutions that you're selling them are not going to be obsolete in a year or two after they put in an investment.
Yeah, I think, the technologies that Aspen Mesh is working on now is a service mesh. And that's obviously a very nascent and new market. So much so that when we talk to customers, one minute they have a director of service mesh and the next minute they don't. They're still trying to figure that out and what that investment looks like. But for me, one of the things that I'm rooted in and what we're rooted in at Aspen Mesh is that it's our firm belief that all future applications will be born out of open technology and software. And so we encourage our customers to look at, different open source projects, understand their uses, their governance, and we really help counsel them on making some of those choices along with our own, but then, helping them navigate those challenging decisions in ways that work for their business and that we can then work with them in. And so one of the biggest things for us is displacing that open source and those open APIs once they are embedded, it's next to impossible. So making the wrong choice early can be very, very impactful longer term their business and cause that investment to kind of be worthless in the future. And so because of this, I think, companies like Aspen Mesh, we embrace that open environment. We try to help our customers pick winners. We try to pick winners. And if we can do that, then we'll be the most successful in this new cloud native world.
Yeah. As I say, I would add on to what Shawn just said. And a lot of what I talk to customers about is the core principles that have been put into place in the development and deployment of technology, this more DevOps, agile approach, get input quickly, iterate, shift left. Those are a lot of the same concepts that I believe modern day enterprises need to adopt in how they think about and run their business. And so I believe long gone are the 3 to 5 year plans of here's how we're going to scale and evolve the business. But that businesses need to work more across functional boundaries, that they need to be agile and experiment quickly and figure out what works and what doesn't. And they have to do that in the context of some constraints, of course. But what you're seeing from a technology perspective is an increasing comfort of CIOs and CTOs in what historically have been traditional companies to now experiment, not with their entire landscape, but to experiment in pockets with new, innovative, and sometimes truly revolutionary ways of getting work done, that if it's successful, they can starburst out across larger pieces of what they're responsible for. And so part of what I talk to leaders at these different enterprise companies about is that shift in how you run a successful modern day enterprise. The other thing that I think is really critically important is if I net it out just to be really kind of simplistic, CIOs buy on 3 things. They buy on what I call the old IBM rule or the popularity contest, which is how many of my friends have already done it, because I don't want to be the lone wolf that does something and it fails and I get fired. So who else has used it? Does the vision of that company align with where my vision is technologically for where I'm taking the business? And does it deliver value today in a meaningful return on investment? Cost of actually getting it in place. Like how quickly do I see that return? And if you think about new technologies, I think this is the opportunity. You have to find a couple landmark accounts that will bet on you, that will help prove out that technology. In doing that, you make it safe for others to adopt. And that's why I think you're seeing this increasing, steepness in the adoption curve of, once people start to demonstrate this new technology works and it might work at scale, then everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. But a lot of enterprises are sitting there and they're waiting to kind of get that critical mass of, are there enough guinea pigs out there that prove that company A's technology is really meaningful? And that's where I think startup and this innovation economy are really important, because large enterprises aren't innovating as much internally anymore from a technology standpoint. They are tending to innovate through these startups that have a broader playing field and are more agile. And then, throwing a lot of stuff against a wall, something works and everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. And I think we're going to see more of that.
Great. One of the questions that I have, Justin, follow up to that is I'm curious about how you think about the life cycle of open source software. And how do you think about its value in comparison to commercial software that has historically been used in the enterprise? Open source software has actually been in use for a long time inside the enterprise, but now we're getting more to the point with cloud native technologies that the question now becomes, how do you think about these for extended periods of time, or is that period of time now just shorter? Due to the immutability of the infrastructure software itself. We find, for example, that companies are having a lot of trouble building microservices, for example, on top of monolithic architectures. But when they move over to containers, they find there's some ability to make it more immutable. Those are technical challenges, but I'm also curious about the economic challenges that come with that. Shawn, I'm curious from your perspective, maybe to start.
Yeah, I've heard open source referred to as free software or free like a puppy, right? It's oftentimes, free on the surface, but there's a lot of investment that you have to make in open source in order to run it, especially in a large enterprise. I mean, so the first thing that you have to do is you have to understand and decide, where and how are we going to use open source in our company, right? Are we going to use it as part of a platform that's going to be key to what we're delivering to our customers? Are we going to build a product out of it in an open core model? Are we going to glue multiple projects together to create a product or provide support and services around it? All kinds of things like that you have to consider when you're going to run that in your modern organization. Once you've done that, then you have to understand, can I contribute? Many enterprises, large enterprises, have a lot of intellectual property restrictions around who can contribute what inside of their organization. So you have to take that into account. You have to understand, what does the governance of the project look like? How active is the project? Are people actively contributing? Are they a well-functioning project? Is the community helpful? Where do I get help and support? And all those kinds of things. And so in that sense, it's really like evaluating any kind of other enterprise product that you're going to buy. Just because it's open source doesn't mean it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns as you move forward. And so we see a lot of companies start with projects like Kubernetes and start with a lot of the technologies around Kubernetes in the CNCF, and they start to use them and they put them into test, they put them into pre-production. But when they go to production, they do reach out to other companies, Aspen Mesh being one of those for support with some of their projects around it, and they have those companies help them unlock a lot of the potential benefits of open source, and while reducing the risk. They need help getting bug fixes, for example, pushed through the community, or they need help influencing a certain area of the community. And so companies like Aspen Mesh and other companies out there that are involved with these communities can help direct and guide a lot of those things for them. And that's one of the ways that they can reduce that risk, because going down an open source path just because the technology is moving fast, once you've committed to that, it's really part of your product and your architecture for the long term, and you have to be willing to make the investment in time and talent and resources and money to get that to be successful.
Yeah, I have to say, Shawn, I'm stealing that, free like a puppy. That is such a great analogy. When I think about open source, I think you call out a lot of the great considerations that companies are starting to get smarter about as they think about what they're going to build and how they're going to build it. Puppet started off open source. We've got a bunch of open source projects now, some like Puppet open source itself, very, very mature, used at over 40,000, companies around the world, to newer projects like Bolt and Lyra. And I think from a societal standpoint, technology has advanced as quickly as it has because of how much open source is out there. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time, and you're able to democratize the ability for people to contribute and advance in ways that are meaningful. And so to me, the two biggest benefits are around open source as a component of what you're doing. One is the advancement of the technology itself. The other is the engagement of the users in the technology. And so we're no longer in a command and control world where people and a company can say, thou shalt use this. It really is more of a bi-directional, I want to use these tools, and somebody saying, yes, that tool fits in the environment, and that coming together in a meaningful way. And so the way that I think about it is, be thoughtful on what open source, technologies you bring in your company. And I think Shawn outlined the considerations beautifully. In addition to that, the way that Puppet looks at it, and there's many different open source strategies, we look at it as, the core of our open source really is focused on that individual feature functionality, where there's the greatest interest and the greatest value of the capability being built out. And that what we build from a commercial standpoint is more geared towards the large enterprise, where the operations, the security, the governance of that in a team or a cross-company basis becomes the incremental capability that's required for a company to get value out of the technology. And so what Shawn mentioned earlier on, security, scalability, reliability, how do you get to that? And how do you think about, freeing up those enterprise engineers to do what's competitively differentiated for them as a business, be it building a new banking application or a retail engagement model with customers? In our case, it's not managing infrastructure automation and creating self-healing environments. It's probably not building out a service mesh. And it's a question of, it's not so much can your engineers do it or not. It's is that the best use of their time? And so to me, I think open source is great to evolve and advance technology. And most enterprises will use pieces of it. But I think they're getting much smarter on where you plug it in and how you leverage it to advance your cause versus what do you need to scale in a reliable, secure way once you understand what technologies are really going to be the next generation suite of things that enterprises are using to run their business.
Ron, I was going to turn it to you for this last section on, the state of the modern enterprise and questions about what is today's modern enterprise. Any thoughts or questions on that?
Yeah, when you're thinking about the modern enterprise and, when we see what happened yesterday, and I know Shawn mentioned this as well, and we touched upon it a little bit, there was a big breach at Capital One where I think it was 100 million credit card applications dating back to 2005 were hacked by a woman from Seattle who was accused of the hack. It was pretty amazing that they actually figured out who did it within a few minutes of the news breaking. But the fact is that this major financial institution, which by the way has fully embraced the modern enterprise and is fully engaged in cloud and agile and containers and hiring modern engineering staff and completely changing the way it interacts with its customers and develops software and does its engineering on the back end. So, they're like a prime candidate for this company who did everything we're talking about here, and yet they still had this major breach. So, I don't know how you protect yourself in the modern world with so many different actors, bad actors out there who are trying to get into businesses large and small. And, when you talk about building this modern enterprise and you look at it against the backdrop of what happened to Capital One yesterday, how do you secure that modern enterprise? You cannot go back to monolithic software, on your own servers. That's not going to happen. So how do you take what's the new modern way of doing things and make it safer so that it at least limits those kinds of breaches?
I think it's what terrifies all of us about this new age that we're going into, because it's starting to impact us personally in ways that are somewhat terrifying and very threatening. And what we tend to see, the highlights in the newspapers are around things like social security numbers and credit card numbers and personal details. But as I was mentioning earlier, like increasingly we're at risk of bad actors getting in and actually controlling things and doing some even worse things kind of in the big scheme of things. And I think there's a few things that the modern enterprise can do to help protect against this. I don't believe that we can ever say we're going to be completely secure. I live in California. I can't say there's never going to be another earthquake, but you can do things to architect and protect against that and to be prepared for when it happens. And to me, some of the things that are increasingly important are things like taking out manual processes and taking out humans in the loop so that you can control what's going on in a more systematic way, eliminating human error as much as bad actors. Some of this is around using automation and the intelligence that you can derive from what's in your environment to ensure that you're patching vulnerabilities. It's to me, the sad thing is when you have these breaches and it comes down to somebody could have done something and they just didn't. So we have to get away from that. And then I think to the earlier comment, we have to start using more and more the machine learning and AI to help us protect, detect and remediate when we find things going on in environments. Because, back to when I was a CIO, it's amazing the number of the breaches that happen. People are in your systems for a really long time. It's not like they get in and 5 minutes later something bad happens. Typically, they've gotten in through some back door, through some phishing attempt, through some credential. They've woven their way through the systems. It's just like the old days of, I'm going to charge a penny on your credit card and see if you notice. They test out little things to see if you've detected them or not. And it can be after months before they really do the damaging work. And so I think there's a lot we can do to make our environments more intelligent and to detect when bad things are happening and to take action against it in ways that we're just on the very tipping point of starting.
Shawn, when you think about service mesh and really the shift from hardware to application-centric architectures, what comes to your mind about the modern enterprise in its state of security?
Yeah, so when it comes, one of the things that drew us to Service Mesh in the beginning was this kind of realization that teams are becoming more and more distributed and dispersed, and at the same time, more and more autonomous through DevOps type of methodologies and agile principles. And one of the problems that we saw with that kind of early on was that means that a lot of the people who are not experts in certain fields may be required to, or being asked to, or may think that they should make decisions that they may not have the expertise to actually be making. And so with Service Mesh, one of the things that we thought was really interesting was being able to have a single point of control that could be injected at runtime that would allow you still some amount of separation of concerns, so that application developers could focus on making high-performing, secure application code and not have to worry so much about all of the business policies and things around network security and application communication security and things like that. And that could be, live inside of the Service Mesh part of the world and let your platform operators and network security professionals start to make those decisions and those policies. And it gave you a really nice place to be able to insert that policy and control it outside of the application's lifecycle. So application developers could work on their timeframes, and platform and operations folks could do the enforcement at runtime. And we thought that was a really great way to do it. As we look more and more at how Service Mesh is evolving for us, we look at it as an opportunity to further allow policy to be made across organizations and be brought together again in that single place where it can be applied and enforced. And then telemetry can be gathered off of it. We can look at the traffic that's going across. We can notice anomalous behaviors, things talking to things that never have before, in ways that they've never talked to them before, using analytics and the data that we're pulling off there. So we really think it's an opportunity to improve the security posture of companies in microservice environments. It's not the end of the solution. I mean, you still have to write secure code. You still have to have perimeter firewalling and different defenses like that. But it is an additional layer that gives you a spot where you can really detect and enforce security policies.
Maybe, Ron, and in conclusion, you can wrap it up with any thoughts or questions that you're having kind of in advance of the TechCrunch Sessions Enterprise event.
So just to reiterate, it's September 5th. It's in San Francisco, and you can get early bird tickets still. So if you are into the kinds of things that we were talking about during this podcast and all of the kinds of issues and things that Shawn and Yvonne so articulated so well, those are actually the type of things that we're going to be talking about and the kinds of issues that we'll be talking about at the enterprise session. And, I hope, a bunch of people out there who are your listeners will share the same kinds of interests and will come join us.
Terrific. Maybe in conclusion, Yvonne and Shawn, you can just give us, your own perspectives about the direction for your own organizations as we start to see more cloud native open source technologies become more relevant, but still needing the understanding that a monolithic architecture, a heritage architecture, which I love, can have its own limitations, such as there may not be any APIs associated with those architectures that are a bit older. How do you see them adapting, and how are you building your business, with that adaptation in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from a Puppet perspective, what we look at is how do we meet our customers where they are and take them where they need to be? And where I believe our customers need to get to, first and foremost is automating their infrastructure. It's amazing, but there's a lot of people who are still manually doing a lot of work, even in traditional heritage environments, that is error prone, that's inefficient. And so starting the cultural shift to more automation, more DevOps, more concepts of CI/CD, even in that traditional world, extending out into, what we were just talking about here, the creation of more self-healing environments where you're integrating the insights and understanding of what's in your environment, what vulnerabilities need to be patched, creating automated ways to do that, and finding that kind of find it, fix it, self-healing opportunities to ensure that you've got safety and scalability and reliability in what you're building. And then as quickly as possible, moving to the new world, to cloud native. And from where I sit, Puppet's value proposition is always returning your environment to a known good state. And in a heritage world, that's through configuration management. And in a cloud native world, that's through helping you manage and scale the workflows that allow you to blow up containers and reconstitute them, the right security and all of that. So I think there's never been a more exciting time to be in technology and to be in enterprises working on this transformation. It's hard, it's complex, but the opportunity to drive impact is just out of this world. So super excited to be part of it and work with our customers on their journeys.
Yeah, and for Aspen Mesh, we're really focused on working with our customers and some of the earliest adopters in containers, Kubernetes, and the service mesh space to really understand, what security and compliance means in this new world. Everything down to what does perimeter mean in a microservices environment? How do you control communications between things inside and outside of your environment? Really helping them understand as they make this transition into a cloud native world, what does it mean for them? How do they make sure that they're making the right decisions, having the most available applications they can while securing the communications between them, the data that they're transmitting, and really using insights and analytics around those communications to make sure that they're providing their customers the best user experience they can with the most security possible.
Well, thank you both for taking the time. Yvonne Wassenaar, the CEO of Puppet, and Shawn Wormke, Senior Director at Aspen Mesh. Joining me today as co-host is Ron Miller. Ron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Ron is the enterprise reporter at TechCrunch. And TechCrunch is having their first enterprise event, TechCrunch Sessions Enterprise, at September 5th in San Francisco. I'll be there. Hope to see everyone there as well. So thank you very much for everyone's time, and we'll be back again soon. Bye-bye. TechCrunch Sessions Enterprise is a new event coming to San Francisco on September 5th, 2019. NewStack is partnering with TechCrunch to get the word out, and we'll be there, moderating a session and live streaming. TNS listeners get a 30% discount on the current ticket price for event registration when using the code TNS30. That's all caps, TNS30. Go to techcrunch.com/events to register, and we'll see you there.